Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us from different regions and time zones. My name is Julie. I'm from Colorado and hosting this session together with Carol from Perth, Australia, and our co-moderators, Angela from Kentucky, Joan from Kampala, Eric from Mumbai, and Karen from Berlin. Please tell us in the chat where you are joining us from. I know we have a couple who have already done that, and thank you. Climate change is exacerbating inequalities around the world. Women are often at the forefront of climate responses, yet they remain underrepresented in decision-making processes.
I can do that too.
Today, we are coming together to explore how strengthening women's leadership and decision-making can bolster climate action and climate justice. This dialogue builds on evidence-based background materials prepared by Zonta Says Now, which are available to participants through the Whova app. You can download all of those materials. I'll now hand over to Carol to tell us a bit about Zonta International.
Thanks, Julie. Founded in 1919 in Buffalo, New York, Zonta International brings together women worldwide to advance equality and peace. Zonta has worked closely with the United Nations for decades and holds general consultative status with ECOSOC. Today, Zonta has more than 25,000 members in over 65 countries, all working to build a better world for women and girls. In short, Zonta says yes to gender equality, no to gender-based violence, and now to climate justice. Our Zonta Says Now to Gender Equal Climate Action campaign is our international campaign for climate justice. I'll now hand over to Eric.
Our presentation today is in 3 sections: why, what works, and what now. In the context of ensuring access to justice for all women and girls, today we will discuss the benefits of women leadership, structural barriers, good practices, and women's lived experiences. We will also explore the transformational role of advocacy, policy dialogue, and systematic change. Global discussions are increasingly showing that climate justice is connected to economic justice, including how resources, opportunities, and financial systems can support sustainable and equitable development. This session invites us to reflect on these connections through dialogue and shared experiences. It is designed as an interactive dialogue. We encourage you to actively share your experiences, perspectives, and ideas, both via the chat and by speaking up during our breakout sessions and final reflections. Across the world, women are already leading climate responses in their communities, protecting water, food systems, and livelihoods. Yet, when climate decisions are made at national or global levels, women's voices are still underrepresented. To understand why inclusive decision-making and access to justice matters, we need to briefly consider how climate impact and economic power are distributed globally. I'll now hand over to Karen.
Thank you, Eric. Climate change is often discussed as an environmental challenge, but it is also a major economic issue. Global economic assessments, including IPCC-based analyses, suggest that climate-related damages could reach several $trillion per year by mid-century if current trends continue. For example, the German Institute for Economic Research estimates that climate damages in Germany could reach around 800 billion euros by 2050. Even today, extreme weather events have already caused more than $2 trillion in economic losses worldwide over the past decade. At the same time, research shows that investments in renewable energy and sustainable systems can generate significant economic benefits. The key question is therefore not only how to reduce emissions, but how societies make the economic and political decisions that shape climate action. To better understand the scale of these numbers, Carol will use a different perspective.
Thanks, Karen. Imagine counting $1 coin every second. You would count $1 million in about 11 and a half days. To reach $1 billion, you would need to keep counting for nearly 32 years. And to reach $1 trillion, you would have to keep counting for around 32,000 years. This contrast shows how enormous the difference is between millions, billions, and trillions. These numbers show the scale of the economic challenge, but they also raise another important question. Who has the power to influence the decisions that shape climate action and economic participation and economic priorities? I'll hand over to Joan to explain this.
Thank you, Carol. Climate change is not only an environmental issue. It is also about power. Who contributes to the crisis? Who experiences its impact? And who shapes decisions? According to a recent Oxfam study, there are now more than 3,000 billionaires worldwide, and only about 13% of them are women. The study also shows that billionaire wealth has increased dramatically and that billionaires are thousands of times more likely to hold political office than an average person. At the same time, emissions are highly unequal. The richest 10% of the global population produce nearly half of global emissions, while the poorest half produce only a small share. Extreme wealth concentration shapes political and economic decisions, influencing who has access to climate finance, resources, and opportunities, and affecting the ability of communities, especially women, who lead climate solutions. Karen will now explain how climate action is evolving.
Thank you, Joan. Yeah, thank you. A significant change has occurred in international discussions on climate and development. Climate action is no longer viewed exclusively as an environmental policy issue. Instead, it is increasingly being linked to justice, governance, and social stability. International climate cooperation now operates on three interconnected levels. First, global agreements define shared goals and principles, including human rights, gender equality, and inclusive participation. Recent United Nations agreements increasingly emphasize inclusive and future-oriented governance, recognizing participation, equality, and justice as essential foundations for sustainable development. Against this backdrop, the need to reform the global financial architecture is being widely recognized. This direction is also reflected in the recent UN agreements, particularly the United Nations Pact for the Future. Second, policies focus on managing transformation, ensuring that economic and social change happens in ways that are fair and inclusive. And third, new mechanisms address stability and climate justice, supporting communities facing climate impacts and structural inequalities. Across all three levels, one insight has become increasingly clear. Effective climate action depends on women's leadership and on meaningful access to justice. When participation is unequal, decision-making processes and therefore climate outcomes are shaped by a narrower range of perspectives. These developments also reflect a broader learning process. For a long time, political and economic systems were shaped by structures that did not fully include women's experiences, leadership, and knowledge in decision-making. Today, growing evidence shows that inclusive and gender-equal governance strengthens resilience, improves policy outcomes, and supports sustainable transformation. To better understand this connection, Julie will take us from these global patterns to lived realities.
Thank you, Karen. Actually, I'm going to throw it to Joan. Joan, if you want to read this next slide, that would be great. It was either or of us. So go. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Karen. I'd like to introduce you to Arandu in Brazzaville, or rather Brazil, and Amina in Senegal. Arandu is an indigenous land and biodiversity steward. She has community authority outside formal governance, yet her safety is threatened by illegal loggings, armed militias, and forest fires. International research shows climate vulnerabilities isn't just about geography. It's about access to rights, resources, and recognition. Aradu represents indigenous women whose leadership sustains ecosystems, yet formal governance often fails to recognize indigenous land rights or decision-making authority. Amina represents skilled professionals in growing renewable energy sectors. In her male-dominated industry, her voice is not heard equally. And the fossil fuel industry is making it difficult for the renewable energy sector to expand. Despite expertise, structural barriers from property law to collateral requirements to care burdens are limiting Amina's leadership pathways. These evidence-based factional examples remind us that participation gaps are rarely caused by lack of competence or commitment. They emerge where institutional conditions limit recognition, access to rights and resources, and participation in decision-making. Angela, will you explain what drives these gaps in participation?
And I'll unmute myself first. International policy frameworks increasingly highlight several interconnected drivers. Gender stereotypes shaping recognition of leadership and expertise, discriminatory social and cultural norms, including child marriage and unequal care responsibilities, structural power imbalances in political and economic systems, intersecting forms of discrimination and violence against women. This is why participation is not only a question of representation, it is fundamentally connected to access to justice. Understanding the drivers of participation gaps helps to explain why meaningful participation remains so unevenly distributed. The lack of equality not only has disastrous effects on women's life chances, but also has dramatic social and economic consequences. Eliminating these drivers is essential for achieving a sustainable future and effective climate policy. Before inviting you to take a closer look at the structural barriers that emerge from these drivers in different contexts, let's summarize why women's leadership matters. Research consistently shows that when women participate in decision making, environmental and climate policies become more inclusive and sustainable. Evidence also shows that peace agreements and community resilience efforts are more durable when women are involved. This means participation is not only about fairness, it directly influences policy quality and long-term sustainability. Equal participation is not only a question of representation, it is a question of governance, legislation, and justice. Access to justice transforms climate commitments into enforceable rights. Put simply, when women participate equally in the process, you get better policies and stronger climate outsources. I'll now hand it over to Julie, as we'd like to hear more from you and learn from your experience.
Thanks, Angela. All right, everyone, we're going to take a poll. And for this poll, we would like you to reflect on your own professional or community experience. Where do you see the greatest gap between women's lived climate realities and their participation in decision making? Please select one option. And if you select the word other, feel free to share your perspective briefly in the chat. Okay. I think we'll end the poll. No, nothing in the, oh, we have one person said other, and I don't see a message. If whomever chose other, please share your comment in the chat if you'd like to.
You can all see
all of the above.
Yeah, Shirley said all of the above for other.
Fair enough.
Hey, I agree with that, but yeah, it's hard to pick just one. 5% community adaptation and local resilience. 16% of us said land, food, and water governance. 11% of us had energy transition and infrastructure. 16% climate finance and budgeting. 47% national or international climate negotiations. And other was 5%. And that was, she chose all of them. Thank you for that. All right, so I really appreciate and thank you for sharing your perspective. What we can see is that these experiences are not isolated situations. Across very different regions and sectors, similar patterns emerge. This suggests that participation gaps are not primarily about individual capacity. Rather, they reflect structural conditions that shape who can influence decisions and who cannot. Understanding these patterns help us move from individual experiences to systemic solutions. I'll hand it over to Karen now to look at some structural barriers limiting women's participation. Karen?
Thanks, Julie. Many of the challenges mentioned in the poll reflect structural barriers that have been documented across many regions. These barriers often include limited access to land, finance, and technology, underrepresentation in governance structures, and unequal access to legal protection and justice systems. And then there's unequal access to education, unpaid care responsibilities, and violence against women in its many forms. Access to justice, therefore, begins long before a courtroom. It includes education, legal literacy, institutional recognition, and the ability to claim and defend rights. Without these conditions, climate commitments and equality frameworks often remain political promises rather than lived realities. This is why access to justice is not only a legal concept, but a prerequisite for inclusive climate governance and sustainable decision-making. I'll now hand it over to Eric.
Thank you, Karen. In our way, why selection? We have made a number of insights. We have shown that climate inequality is closely linked to decision-making inequality. Those most affected by climate change, especially women and marginalized communities, are often excluded from climate governance and policy processes. We have shown that women's leadership improves climate governance and sustainability outcomes. Inclusive decision-making leads to stronger, more resilient, and more equitable climate policies. We have shown how structural barriers limit participation, unequal access to political power, legal protection, financial resources, and time opportunities continues to restrict women's leadership. And access to justice is essential. Without enforceable rights, climate and commitments often remain political promises rather than lived reality. Transition line. While structural barriers are real, women around the world are already creating solutions. I'll hand over to Carol to explore what's working. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. What we see globally is not a lack of women's leadership, but a lack of enabling systems that allow their participation and leadership to shape decisions and outcomes. Women's participation is easier when they have the same legal rights as men, and they are included in government and can participate equally in government processes. Having the same access to resources and climate finance as men also makes a difference. And when the working environment is safe and institutions are accountable for that safety, women will be able to participate and lead without fear. In short, eliminating the structural barriers and establishing the enabling conditions secures sustainable climate outcomes. Around the world, women are not waiting for inclusion. They're already leading climate solutions. In many countries, women are leading climate adaptation and sustainability initiatives, and community-based solutions often emerge from women's leadership. These solutions become scalable and sustainable when women have decision-making authority, legal recognition of their rights, and access to justice. Successive initiatives emerge where enabling legal, institutional, and economic conditions support participation and leadership. Solutions, therefore, reflect not only individual agency, but functioning governance systems. Angela will show us some examples of what works across different regions and sectors.
Thanks, Carol. So what makes climate solutions sustainable? Research and practice show that climate solutions are most effective when they combine leadership and participation, legal empowerment and recognition of rights, community-based knowledge and expertise, and where there is collaboration between civil societies and government institutions. These elements can transform local initiatives into sustainable governance models. This approach is also reflected in the evidence compiled through the Zonta Says Now background material. We have seen many examples of women-led climate action. We see Indigenous women protecting ecosystems using their traditional knowledge, and women farmers who have gained land rights and were able to improve their land and grow climate-resistant crops. we have seen groups of women take cases to court against governments and companies to strengthen environmental accountabilities. And I think most of us would have seen how women step up to improve the resilience of their communities before, during, and after disasters. These examples demonstrate that climate justice is strengthened when leadership and rights are combined. They also show how civil society plays a crucial role in bridging communities and policy systems. I'll hand it back to Julie now for our discussion.
All right, everyone, before we go into breakout discussions, let's pause for a moment. We've just explored many global patterns and examples. Now, we really want to hear from you, because many of the most interesting insights come from your experiences. When you're in your group, please focus mainly on one question. Here it is. What helped women successfully shape climate or sustainability decisions in your experience? You may also reflect on what lessons from these experiences could be applied in other regions or sectors. Each group is invited to identify 2 to 3 key success factors and 1 transferable lesson to share afterwards. As you discuss, you may also think about what helps transform successful initiatives into lasting policy or advocacy change. Please start by briefly introducing yourselves when you get in your group, just your name and your location, and then we'll begin the discussion. So we are going to divide us all up. Carol, take it away.
Right. I'm going to put people into 4 groups, okay?
Yep.
Group 1, Julie, you're in group 1. Angela,
Okay.
you're in group 2. In group 3, we have Karen. And in group 4, we have Eric. Okay?
Yep. All right, welcome back, everyone. I'm so glad that you participated in a breakout room. Thank you for all of your rich insights. We had some great chit chat going on in our breakout room number 1. If you have something you want to share, a highlight, please put it in the chat, because we have some more content to cover, and it's our best way of making sure everybody can read it and see it and stay on time. So here are the cluster examples that we talked about as a group, and they were legal recognition and access to rights, community leadership and local knowledge, supportive policy and governance frameworks, strong civil society networks, access to funding and resources. I'm sure something has come up in your group. I know we have Joan Kambayambi she put in the chat, so that was our message to everyone. She said in Uganda they have movement building for women to lead because they're the majority in numbers and they've taken over leadership in their communities, which is wonderful. Eric's group said legal legislation and support. And Eric, I'll have to say, we talked about that too. We talked about a Zonta Club really supporting ending human trafficking legislatively. So I think that's fantastic. Oh, legacy and full collaboration. I love that. That must have been a rich conversation. Anybody else? Let's see. Angela wrote government influence. Very good. And Karen, working with the young generation. Karen shared, thank you, Eric. Working with the young generation. Let me just pause there for a minute. We've heard a lot at CSW about empowering our adolescent girls. Keep that in mind, because
Froze.
Julie froze.
Yeah, Julie's frozen. We've got quite a few comments coming through on the chat line, and Julie was just talking about working with allies and youth as being a focus in CSW 70. But I also noticed, Angela, you talked about government influence as well. Was there any specific any part of that which you'd like to comment on?
Well, Helen was in my group, and so she talked about the many climate groups, and they're very well represented with the women, and then their emergency management and how the impact with women for growing and whatnot. So, in New Zealand, I mean, they are very focused as a country as to where they're going. And then by contrast, in the States, you have it broken down by each state. So,
Right,
we don't have the nationally standing up and saying, what we could do if everyone had solar.
right.
We have, they've cut so many of the supports, but at the local level, we had a change from the men running the Kentucky Resource Commission to having women in charge. And so at that point, it was like the focus was how much money can we get? And
Right.
now the focus is shift to actually managing the resources of the water and the land and the energy. And how does that affect the rest of everyone involved? So
That segues
government influence.
nicely. That segues nicely to what Karen's group was talking about. Karen, do you want to comment on your women in Ghana needing economic empowerment and solar energy has to be financed? What was your conversation?
Yes, oh, it was a very rich conversation. So with different angles from well, Ghana and as well from Jamaica. And so it was for me, it was very touching to hear that uh, uh, women, of course, in Ghana are mostly endangered because they are uh, um, uh, they are much into the agriculture, and they are completely, of course, affected by heavy rainfall, stuff like that. And they know so much about investing sustainable in a sustainable way. So they need more economical empowerment. And also they are in need of more investing in solar energy, which is still a very critical point in Ghana, as it is initially very costly.
Mhm.
And so that's where they are really needing much more support. And I love to hear from the experiences with the hurricane in Jamaica from um, that they that an initiative who is really active in charity already there was listening to the needs of the people on the ground and providing them with help, single mothers, for instance, who needed a home and yeah, and who had no power anymore. So they know exactly what people need in situations like disasters, and they are at the table as well because they have the experiences. So they are at the table at the local government level, and they have got a very active mayor there who is listening to them and taking that into account for disaster preparedness. So this is what women can contribute in those countries.
Well, I'm pleased to see that Julie has been able to re-establish connection. So I'll hand back to Julie. Do you want to talk about what your group discussed in a bit more detail, Julie?
Absolutely. Sorry about my background. Everything went crazy and dropped out. We had some great conversations. My husband's was in the group, and we both talked about how we have a robust showing of women in government leadership in our city and also in our county, and that our Women and Gender Equity Advisory Board for the city goes and talks to different departments and talks about the buildings codes and sustainability, et cetera. And they listen, and they have the group come and talk to them, and they put things in their project reports and plans for the following year. Gloria talked a lot about sustainability commission in Los Angeles, and they come up with projects and agendas, and the city abides by that. And they are women, also have women decision makers. For example, they had a good idea putting compost into green barrels rather than in the trash, and that's happening right now. Gloria also talked about last year they had a majority female council. I hope I got that right. And Gail talked about that it's tough for women leaders, decision makers, because creating safe spaces online is an issue, digital bullying, etc. And that really can impact women and their ability to lead, actually. But she also talked about how her Zonta Club, which is pretty exciting, in Michigan has been working with the legislators on ending human trafficking and human trafficking laws. So that to me is a perfect example of what has helped women successfully shape sustainability decisions. Yeah, thank you.
Julie,
sorry. Yeah.
Before you came back, we'd heard from Angela and Karen's group, and we hadn't heard back from Eric's group to have a bit more discussion.
Yeah, nice. I'm done.
Yeah. Oh, we had a very healthy discussion. Thank you. We had Bernadine, Diana, Teresa, and Ellen. And just a quick summary of what we discussed. Basically, they laid emphasis on legal support. They wanted that legislation needs to be behind. Governmental support is very important. Also, we discussed about research, conservation decision, legacy, and full collaboration from the past and the future. Besides that, like-minded women to come together, powerful women organizations with climate gender was also taken upon. And another important thing that we highlighted was work with the younger generation. We need to involve colleagues in various programs. But one backdrop and drawback is motivating people is a big challenge. So we need more motivations. And I think that's what summarizes our discussion. Thank you.
Over to you, Julie.
Thank you, Eric. I'm going to throw it back to you. If you can talk to us about what works.
Our What Works section, we have shown that women are already leading effective climate solutions worldwide. Community-based leadership, indigenous knowledge, and grassroots initiatives are driving adaptation and resilience. We have shown that successful climate initiatives combine leadership, legal recognition, and community engagement. When women gain decision-making authority and recognition of rights, climate solutions become more sustainable and scalable. We have also seen how civil society plays a key bridging role as it connects local experiences with policy processes and strengthens accountability and implementation. Finally, we showed that good practices offer transferable lessons. Experiences across regions demonstrate that inclusive governance and legal empowerment strengthens climate action. So what can we do now? Over to Angela.
Thank you, Eric. Let us now explore how civil society and policy processes can strengthen and scale these conditions. Civil society plays a crucial role in translating climate commitments into action as it amplifies women's leadership and participation. It supports women's leadership, strengthens access to justice, and ensures that policies reflect lived realities. Civil society also holds institutions accountable for implementing climate and gender equality commitments. As climate justice is closely linked to economic justice, civil society plays an essential role in ensuring that climate policy and economic systems support equitable and sustainable development. Joan will now show us some tools to strengthen gender response climate and economic governance.
Thanks, Angela. Sustainable climate solutions depend on women having equitable access to financial resources and economic opportunities. Women need practical tools to translate knowledge into action. For example, women need evidence-based resources that link climate, gender, and economic equity to strengthen their advocacy and participation in decision-making processes. And having access to educational materials, supporting policies, and connecting to networks with a wide range of experiences will mean that women are well prepared to influence economic and climate policy. Tools and networks help communities and civil society organizations engage effectively in climate finance and economic policy decisions, locally and globally. However, participation is only part of a story. We also need to strengthen governance, as Karen will explain.
Thanks, Joan. There are 6 key priority areas where we can strengthen gender-responsive climate and economic governance. In the financial area, we can implement gender-responsive budgeting and provide equitable access to climate finance and credit. Legally, we can empower and protect environmental defenders and enforce land, inheritance, and resource rights. And we can aim for equal representation and parity in climate and economic governance structures and create sustainable and inclusive economic systems that support climate justice. Climate justice requires inclusive governance, legal empowerment, and economic systems that support sustainable development, resource distribution. Around the world, experts and international initiatives increasingly emphasize the need to rethink financial and economic frameworks to enable climate justice and gender equality. Civil society can play an important role in shaping this dialogue. I hand you back to Julie so we can discuss this further.
Thank you, Karen. Quick note that we had Constance from Ghana in the chat. So if anyone wants to look in the chat and read about what she's experienced, that would be wonderful to learn more from her. All right, now it's your turn, everyone. From your experience in the discussion today, what is one action your organization or community could take to strengthen women's leadership and climate justice? Which Constance from Ghana has just answered that. So thank you, Constance. That also applies here. This could include economic participation and resource access. Please put your ideas in the chat or raise your hand on your icon, use the little icon to raise your hand, and we'll share some ideas. And then I'll hand it back to Eric to summarize the section in a minute. So I have some answers here. While we're waiting for more chats, I don't see anybody's hand up. Equal representation at the table for discussions. Wonderful. Juta says, put a quote on female, I wonder, female politicians. And Juta, quota. Okay, I was just about to ask that. Put a quota on female politicians. Great idea. Has to be, this percent of females. And does anyone know who has done that? Somebody I learned the other day.
We have in Australia.
Okay.
The Labour Party in Australia started putting quotas in their candidates standing for election. And currently in Australia, we have 45% women in the lower house and 54% women in the upper house. And the Labour government has a very strong majority. And that's been reflected in the support of women. The opposition party has very, very few women in it, and it's been having a lot of problems trying to get support recently. So that really showed that the quota system from a party perspective worked very well.
Bravo, that's
Yes.
wonderful.
Yes.
Yes, I think I can also comment on this. In Germany, the Green Party, they have a quota on all their politicians. And so you have every second position who can be voted on is a woman. And this is the reason why we have much more really competent women in the parliament, and they do much more than the other politicians.
I think you see that wherever this is happening, that a lot gets done.
Even in India,
Yes.
we have 1/3 representation by women in the parliament. And in the local municipal elections, it's nearly 50% where we have women representatives. And we also have a women mayor in our city. So,
Oh,
well,
nice. Very good,
yes.
Eric. That's amazing. I have two in the chat, more comments to read. Ellen tells us to involve younger generation, very important, really empower the adolescent girls. So super. Oh, we have another one. Let me finish reading hers. And it says their ideas are invaluable and they can help raise awareness. Agreed. Very, very good comment. Diana says, the first word, I'm not sure what it is, BU9D, so maybe, but let me finish it. Collaboration of academic programs using the SDGs with local community groups so that such academic programs as women's studies are moving forward with climate action in a meaningful way, collaborating with active community groups, which is a fantastic idea to, and Zonta clubs that have a university or a college as an anchor or even a community college worldwide can really advocate for this kind of academic program, which I think would be lovely. And then Rahia says, representation in climate governance, ensuring women holds positions in local, national, and international climate councils, task forces, I don't know why I said it that way, and advisory boards. Yes, absolutely. Something Eric brought up is motivation. We still have to support her, whoever she is, to get people to feel comfortable running for office. So I love that. Thank you, Rahia. Constance shares with us that in Ghana, the implementation of the Affirmative Action Act will see an increase in women's leadership. That's fantastic. Thank you, Constance. I'm so happy to hear that. Helen says participation as a disproportionately affected group under currently proposed emergency management legislation in relation to emergency management systems as a result of severe weather events. Yes, absolutely. I think we know that women and girls are the most, or children are the most vulnerable when it comes to severe storms, emergency conditions.
Julie?
Yeah.
I kept hitting the shift key and just putting in just little pieces of a sentence. But
Okay.
Our little city of Burbank in LA County, we have, as I said, a majority city council, but we also have majority female department heads in our city. And I have been trying, and we're hoping maybe in the next year to establish a women's advisory board or a commission the status of women there in Burbank. It's going to take a while, but that's one of my goals because we just got an ordinance passed after a year and a half, so I know it's doable.
Yes, and that's a great goal to have. What a wonderful, wonderful idea. All right, Teresa says in Taiwan, the quota system has been in effect for more than 15 years. Wow, that's wonderful. And all government committees need to have at least 1/3 women on board. I am on the National Sustainable Development Committee chaired by the Premier, representing Taipei Women's Rescue Foundation. Thank you, Teresa. That is powerful. We can learn. What I see is this is happening all over the world. So Teresa added, now the Taiwanese Congress has 46% women legislators for more than 5 years. So let's hope that this is a domino effect. We have Global North and Global South represented. Let's keep working, walking the walk and talking this talk so that it is impressive, Constance. Constance says, this is impressive. So I really thank you for your experiences. If there's any one last experience that anyone wants to share.
I do have one, and that is my community, my county has, the government has encouraged the formation of a climate interest group, essentially, of citizens, of community organizations that have some interest in the climate realm. And my club could take the initiative to participate in that. We have talked about it, we haven't done it yet, and we can therefore bring the women's point of view from Zonta with us.
That is a great idea. And I hope you all participate. That would be lovely.
I do too.
Teresa meant, and thank you, Bobby. I'm glad you're back. That was a great thing to share, and something else that we can all maybe think about for our own communities. And Teresa left her email address in the chat if anybody wants to reach out to her to talk more about what she said about what's happening in her area. Okay, so I'm going to throw it to Eric. Eric, let's go back to our journey today. What now?
Thanks, Julie. Thank you. In this What Now section, we covered advocacy, policy dialogue, and systematic change. We showed that climate justice requires coordinated action across governance, justice, and economic systems. Policies must work together to support women's participation, enforce their rights, and provide equitable access to resources. We showed that gender-responsive climate governance requires structural policy reforms. This includes equal representation, legal empowerment, protection of environmental defenders, and inclusive climate financing. We showed that economic frameworks influence climate justice outcomes. Equitable access to finance, resources, and economic opportunities is essential for sustainable climate solutions. And finally, we showed that civil society is essential for advocacy and implementation. Civil society translates global commitments into local action and strengthens accountability. I'll hand over to Julie and Carol to wrap up this session. Thank you.
Thank you again, Eric. All right, Constance already put her email in, or also put her email in if anybody wants to reach out to see what's happening in Ghana. It'd be a wonderful, it's a wonderful opportunity to get to know our attendees and what's happening in this area. Okay, so today's dialogue has shown us something very clear. Climate justice is not only about environmental protection, it's about governance, rights, and access to resources. We have explored how women around the world are already leading climate solutions in their communities, protecting livelihoods, strengthening resilience, and creating pathways towards sustainable development. We have also reflected on the barriers that continue to limit women's participation, including unequal access to decision-making, limited legal protection, and unequal access to economic opportunities and resources. Our discussion highlights an important reality. Climate justice requires inclusive governance. It requires multilateral dialogue and cooperation addressing global inequalities between regions and communities. It requires respecting and empowering women, including Indigenous women, as agents of climate protection and community resilience around the world. It requires access to justice that transforms commitments into enforceable rights. And it requires economic systems that support equity, resilience, and shared prosperity. Civil society plays a critical role in connecting lived experiences with policy processes, strengthening accountability, and advocating for gender-responsive climate action. Don't you agree, Carol?
Yes, Julie. The insights shared during our breakout discussions remind us that solutions already exist. Around the world, women are shaping climate leadership when enabling conditions are in place, including participation opportunities, legal empowerment, and access to resources. The challenge ahead is to strengthen and scale these solutions through advocacy, policy dialogue, and collaborative action across local, national, and global levels. Climate justice requires gender equality, and gender equality requires women's leadership and access to justice. Sustainable climate solutions depend on economic systems that support equity, resilience, and shared prosperity. Change happens when leadership rights and equitable economic opportunity come together. Zonta International and the Zonta Says Now campaign remain committed to supporting advocacy, education, and dialogue that advance gender equality and climate justice. We invite you to carry today's dialogue forward into your communities, organisations, and policy work. We also encourage you to remain connected through our Zonta network and explore the background materials and advocacy resources shared through the Hoover app. These materials are intended as a dialogue resource and will continue to evolve through shared experiences and feedback. Was there any final questions before we finish? Just want to check. There's no questions in the chat, Julie? No? Good. Okay,
I don't see any questions. No questions.
That's great. Lovely. Okay, then. Well, Angela, Eric, Joan, Julie, Karen, and I thank you for your engagement today, for sharing your experiences and your commitment to creating more inclusive and sustainable futures. Before we leave, I'll stop the screen sharing, and if you feel comfortable, please turn on your cameras. We can see each other and we can say cheerio, say goodbye. Thank you again.
Bye.
Goodbye. Auf Wiedersehen.
Thanks for
Let's
joining the
wave.
session.